Before we proceed, just a quick review on what we discussed last Tuesday as part of DAX. I discussed about what is DAX, why DAX, and where and all DAX can be used at an 100 feet height, and then discussed about the data types, different types of operators such as arithmetic operator, comparison operator, logical operators, and so on. Next, we have looked at the aggregation functions, such as the count family of functions, the average family of functions. Today, we will resume with sum and Sumx function as part of aggregation function. And then I will proceed with the information functions, calculated columns, measure, evaluation context. Followed by this, we'll dive into the DAX function, calculate table, filter. If time permits, we'll take a look at this one. So now we will start with the aggregation functions such as the sum and Sumx function. What is sum function? Sum is an aggregator function. I call this as an aggregator function. Using sum, we can do aggregation. It falls under aggregation function category, the sum. Not only sum, the min function, max, min, max, average, count, sum, all these things falls under aggregator category. Sum is an aggregation function. In the case of sum function, it takes an argument of your column name. The sum function, it adds every value in a single column and returns the result. For example, you have a column by the name of quantity. So in the quantity, you have 8, 9, 10, and you have something like 11 and 2, something like this, right? So you have these values, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. When you use a sum function, what it does is it totals all these values and it gives you the total value. The sum function gives us, it aggregates all these values, which means it summarizes all these values, it adds all these values, and it gives you the total, the sum function. It is capable of doing addition of all the values for a given column. In this case, the quantity column. The next one is the Sumx function. Sumx function iterates through a table specified in the first parameter, one row at a time, and complete a calculation specified in the second parameter. The second parameter is your expression. The first parameter is your table name. As we discussed earlier, the function the function name that ends with x are called iterator function. All the iteration function takes the first argument as your table name. This is the one you need to remember it. So in the case of Sumx function, it iterates one row at a time and complete a calculation, whatever that you specified in your second parameter. This is your first parameter, sales. This is your table name. And the second parameter, you have specified the expression name. So in this case, what happens is, since you have used the Sumx function, it iterates each and every row. So in this case, it takes the unit price and then it multiply the unit price with the quantity, and then it stores the the product of these two values in the sales amount column for each record. So once this has been done, it goes to the next row, and then in the next row, it picks up the unit price and then quantity, and then it takes the product of these two, and then it gives you the output of these two. It assigns this value into a sales amount. Likewise, one row at a time, the X function, because it's an iterator function, it iterates each and every row in a data set, and then it evaluates your expression. In this case, your expression is unit price into quantity, which means it takes the product of unit price and quantity, and then the output of this one will get stored your sales amount row by row. The Sumx function is called your iterator function. So there are lot of iterator functions. Sorry, there are a lot of aggregation functions are there. Not only Sumx, we have minx, max x, okay, and average x, and so on. Okay. So in the case of iterator function, min x or max x, right? In all the cases, it does the row by row. It goes one row at a time, to complete a calculation or to perform a computation specified in a second parameter. Okay, to summarize. So before we summarize, let us go to the Power BI desktop, and I'll show you quickly how to perform sum and sum x. Here, I just quickly go to the Power BI desktop, and then I'll show you how to do the sum function. Sum function by default, it is the default implicit measure, the sum function. Look here, this is the card visual. I just simply drag and drop the sales amount here. Here, next to the numeric column, you can see the sigma sign, quantity and sales amount, including profit. This list price, these are all numeric column, and you can see the sigma sign for along with the numeric columns. Okay, so in this case, if you click on the sales amount, you can see that by default, the default aggregation function is used was sum. Okay, you can change it to some other thing, but it is not advisable changing this one here. And this is the one. This is called your implicit measure. And in this case, the sum function is used by default. And the next one is the Sumx function. I'll just show you quickly the Sumx function. I just copy paste this visual, and then I just remove this, and I'll go to the modeling tab, and I'll create another new measure. So good that here we have the thing. Okay, here what it is, I'll create another measure. I'm going to say sum x demo measure is equal to the quantity in this case. So I'll have to use sum x function. Here the table is some sales fact. I just go here and here quantity into the list price. So good, we don't see any error. I just drag and drop the newly created measure in here. So you can see both the values are same here. The Sumx function iterates row by row, and then it performs the computation. All right, so the next one is the difference between these two. Now let us discuss about the difference. The sum is just summarizing the values of one column. It is an aggregator function. It is just summarizing values of one column. Whereas sum x is an iterator function. Remember that this is an aggregation function. Sum is an aggregation function. Sum x is an iterator function. Unlike sum, the sum x is capable of performing row by row calculation and iterates through each row of a specified table to perform the calculation or to complete the calculation. Okay, the sum x is capable of performing row by row calculations. The next one is the important point that you need to remember is all the aggregators. Which one is aggregator? In this case, the sum is an aggregator. All the aggregators internally inside the Power BI engine are iterators. I said SumX is an iterator. This is an aggregator. Now I made one statement. I made a contradictory statement. Okay, so even in the case of sum, behind the scene, the Power BI engine, it converts this as a SumX function. Even the sum is also an iterator function. Now the question is, if the sum function is also internally get transformed as a SumX function, then why we need two functions here? They could have left with only one function instead of having two different functions. They could have left with the SumX function. It's a very valid question, but the point here is the syntax sugar. You have something called syntax sugar. So, for example, if you want to do sum of sales amount, for example, we have the sales fact table. In this, you have the column sales amount, right? This is the one you need to do it. But when you use the when you use this sum function, behind the scene, what happens is it converts this one. The Power BI engine converts this one as sales fact, comma the sales fact, the sales amount column. Got it? So it transforms the sum as a sumx function. So now the question is, okay, then why we need to have a sum function? Just assume that we don't have sum function. What you have to do is, if you want to do some kind of sum on the sales amount, you need to just use the sumx function. The first argument, you need to type the table name, and then you need to do this one. You need to specify the column name. Okay, so to improve the productivity, what they did, they've given, or them to make it more developer friendly, they gave the simple version of sum function. Instead of giving sum x, like specify the table name and followed by the table name, you specify the column name. Here, simply specify the table name with the column name. That is enough. Okay, you don't have to type too much. That is the whole idea of this one. Right, so now you got confused, right? So earlier I started with saying that it's an aggregator sum. Now it is an iterator, not only you. And most of them, when they get screamed when I say these two are same, because behind the scene, the Power BI engine converts or transform the sum function into sumx function behind the scene. Okay, that is what I'm going to show you now one more time with another example. So this is the measure, right? I just select this one, and then here we'll create another measure. Simply, I put the sales amount. I just specify it here, sales amount. That's it. And then I just create another visual here. Sum XM. I just drop it here. Look here. This is my sum XM, and this is simply I just dragged and dropped the sales column here. We don't need this one. Sumx function. Even the case of sumx function, it does the same thing. In this case, what I will do is, okay, I just keep this as it is, and we will compare the sumx function with sum function. You don't have to type the table name and all. Simply you just specify sum of, it's not sumx, it's sum function. Okay, that's why it is highlighting with syntax or something like that. Look here, the sumx and sum. Even in the case of sumx, I have used this, the sales amount. Even in the case of summ, I have used the sales amount column. In both the cases, it gives me the same output. So with this, we are able to understand when I use the sum function behind the scene, it converts the sum function like the sales fact, the table name, comma, the column name. Okay, so in one aspect, these two are same. The advantage of sumx function is you can specify the expression like this. In this case, you can do some kind of arithmetic, or you can implement your business logic here. Quantity into price, it gives you the sales amount. It does the row by row computation for the sales amount with this formula or with this business rule. Okay, to summarize quickly, sum is just as is an aggregator using which it summarizes the values of one single column, whereas the sumx function is capable of performing row by row calculation. So this concludes the difference between sum and sumx function.